Let's start the book. Atomic Habits. Introduction: the tiny tweaks that transform your life. Have you ever tried to build a new habit, only to watch it fade away after a few weeks? We often blame our lack of willpower for these frustrating failures, but the real culprit is a flawed system. Atomic Habits by James Clear flips the script on personal development by revealing that massive success does not require massive action. Instead, the secret lies in making minuscule, almost imperceptible changes to your daily routine. This game-changing guide offers a practical, science-backed framework for rewiring your behavior without exhausting your motivation. By mastering the art of small improvements, you can effortlessly break bad routines and build an environment that guarantees long-term success. Get ready to discover how a 1% daily improvement can completely redefine your future. Point 1. The hidden power of 1%. Does the idea of completely overhauling your life overnight sound absolutely exhausting to you? It is a common misconception that massive success requires massive, earth-shattering action, but the truth is actually much quieter and far less dramatic. We live in a culture that celebrates the huge milestone, the sudden transformation, and the overnight success. Because of this, we frequently convince ourselves that we must make monumental changes to see any real difference in our health, our finances, or our relationships. However, a deep dive into the science of continuous improvement reveals that the most reliable path to exceptional results lies in the steady application of tiny, seemingly insignificant changes. Consider the astonishing story of the British cycling team. For nearly a century, British cyclists were the laughingstock of the cycling world. Their performance was so dismal that some top bicycle manufacturers even refused to sell gear to the team, fearing it would damage their brand's reputation. Everything shifted when a man named Dave Brailsford was hired as the performance director. Brailsford believed in a concept he called the aggregation of marginal gains. His philosophy was incredibly straightforward. If you break down everything you can think of that goes into riding a bicycle and then improve it by just 1%, you will get a significant increase when you put them all together. Brailsford and his team did not look for one magic bullet. Instead, they focused on hundreds of tiny tweaks. They redesigned the bike seats to make them slightly more comfortable. They rubbed alcohol on the tires for slightly better grip. They had riders wear electrically heated overshorts to maintain ideal muscle temperature while waiting to race. They even went so far as to hire a surgeon to teach the riders the best way to wash their hands to simply avoid catching a cold. They tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the fastest muscle recovery, and they brought the exact same mattress and pillow to every hotel so the riders would get a marginally better night of sleep. Individually, these changes seem almost laughable. How could washing your hands differently win you a gold medal? But collectively, these 1% improvements compounded into a staggering advantage. Within just a few years, British cycling absolutely dominated the Olympic Games and the Tour de France, proving that atomic habits, tiny, granular improvements, can yield monumental results. The mathematics of improvement perfectly illustrate this phenomenon. If you can get just 1% better each day for 1 year, you will end up 37 times better by the time you are done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you will decline nearly down to zero. What starts as a tiny win or a minor setback accumulates into something much larger. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Just as money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your habits multiply as you repeat them. They seem to make little difference on any given day, and yet the impact they deliver over the months and years can be absolutely enormous. This brings us to a crucial concept: the plateau of latent potential. Have you ever put in weeks of hard work at the gym, only to step on the scale and see that you haven't lost a single pound? This is a classic example of hitting the plateau. When we start a new habit, we expect our progress to be linear. We expect to see immediate results for our efforts. But the reality is that the most powerful outcomes of any compounding process are delayed. Think about an ice cube sitting on a table in a cold room. The room is 25 degrees. You slowly heat the room. 26 degrees, 27, 28. The ice cube still sits there, completely unchanged. 29, 30, 31. Still nothing happens. Then you hit 32 degrees. The ice begins to melt. A 1-degree shift, seemingly no different from the temperature increases before it, has unlocked a massive change. Your habits work exactly the same way. You might put in months of effort, building good routines and making healthy choices, without seeing any visible transformation. You are in what James Clear calls the valley of disappointment. It is incredibly easy to give up during this phase because you feel like your efforts are being wasted, but your work is not being wasted. It is simply being stored. You are heating the room from 25 to 31 degrees. When you finally break through the plateau of latent potential, people will call it an overnight success, completely ignoring the months of quiet, invisible work that made the sudden transformation possible. To truly harness this power, we must fundamentally shift our focus away from goals and toward systems. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you are a coach, your goal might be to win a championship, but your system is the way you recruit players, manage your assistant coaches, and conduct practice. If you completely ignored your goal and focused only on your system, would you still succeed? The answer is a resounding yes. Focusing purely on goals creates several hidden problems. First, winners and losers have the exact same goals. Every Olympian wants to win a gold medal. Every candidate wants to get the job. If successful and unsuccessful people share the same goals, then the goal cannot be what differentiates the winners from the losers. Second, achieving a goal is only a momentary change. If you have a messy room and you set a goal to clean it, you will have a clean room for exactly one day. If you don't change the sloppy habits that led to the messy room in the first place, you will be looking at a new pile of clutter by the end of the week. Third, goals restrict your happiness. The implicit assumption behind any goal is, once I reach my goal, then I will be happy. This creates a heavy burden and delays your enjoyment of life. A systems-first mentality, on the other hand, allows you to fall in love with the process. You can be satisfied anytime your system is running. Ultimately, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. By committing to tiny 1% improvements and focusing on the daily process rather than the distant outcome, you lay an unbreakable foundation for lifelong success. Point 2. How do you actually change your identity? Why is it that two people can set the exact same goal, yet one succeeds naturally while the other fails miserably? The answer lies deep within how we view ourselves and the fundamental beliefs we hold about who we are. When we try to change our lives, we usually go about it entirely the wrong way. We focus on what we want to achieve rather than who we wish to become. To truly master our habits, we must understand the 3 layers of behavior change, which can be visualized like the rings of a tree or the layers of an onion. The outermost layer is changing your outcomes. This level is concerned with changing your results, losing weight, publishing a book, winning a championship. Most of the goals you set in life are associated with this level of change. The middle layer is changing your process. This level is concerned with changing your habits and systems, implementing a new routine at the gym, decluttering your desk for better workflow, or developing a meditation practice. Most of the habits you build are associated with this level. The innermost layer, however, is changing your identity. This level is concerned with changing your beliefs, your worldview, your self-image, and your judgments about yourself and others. Most people begin the process of changing their habits by focusing on the outcomes. They say, I want to lose 20 pounds, and then they force themselves to eat salads and run on a treadmill. This is an outcome-based habit. The alternative is to build identity-based habits. With this approach, we start by focusing on who we wish to become. Consider two people who are trying to quit smoking and are offered a cigarette. The first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." It sounds like a reasonable response, but this person still believes they are a smoker who is simply trying to do something else. They are hoping their behavior will change while carrying around the exact same deeply rooted beliefs. The second person declines by saying, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." It is a small difference in phrasing, but it signals a massive shift in identity. Smoking was part of their former life, not their current one. They no longer identify as someone who smokes. True behavior change is identity change. You might start a habit because of motivation, but the only reason you will stick with it is that it becomes part of your identity. Anyone can convince themselves to visit the gym or eat healthily once or twice. But if you do not shift the belief behind the behavior, then it is incredibly difficult to stick with long-term changes. Improvements are only temporary until they become part of who you are. The ultimate goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to learn an instrument. The goal is to become a musician. Your behaviors are usually a direct reflection of your identity. What you do is an indication of the type of person you believe that you are, either consciously or subconsciously. Research has shown that once a person believes in a particular aspect of their identity, they are far more likely to act in alignment with that belief. For example, people who identified as being a voter were much more likely to vote than those who simply claimed voting was an action they wanted to perform. But where does our identity come from? The word identity actually originates from the Latin words identitas, which means being, and identitum, which means repeatedly. Your identity is literally your repeated beingness. Whatever your identity is right now, you only believe it because you have proof of it. If you go to church every Sunday for 20 years, you have evidence that you are religious. If you study biology for 1 hour every night, you have evidence that you are a studious person. If you go to the gym even when it is snowing, you have evidence that you are committed to fitness. The more evidence you have for a belief, the more strongly you will believe it. This means that your habits are not just actions you perform to get results, they are the very channel through which you develop your deepest self-image. Every time you write a page, you are proving to yourself that you are a writer. Every time you practice the violin, you are proving you are a musician. Every time you encourage your team, you are proving you are a leader. Each habit is like a suggestion. Hey, maybe this is who I am. If you cast enough votes for the right identity, your beliefs will inevitably change to match your actions. This concept provides a highly practical two-step process for changing your identity. Step 1, decide the type of person you want to be. Step 2, prove it to yourself with small wins. Let's say you want to lose weight. Instead of agonizing over a strict diet, ask yourself, who is the type of person that could lose weight? Perhaps it is the type of person who is healthy and active. Now your goal shifts from losing weight to simply becoming a healthy and active person. Throughout your day, whenever you face a choice, you ask yourself, what would a healthy person do? Would a healthy person walk or take a cab? Would a healthy person order a burrito or a salad? If you consistently act like a healthy person, eventually you will become that person. However, we must also be deeply aware of the dark side of this principle. Just as your habits can build a positive identity, they can also reinforce a negative one. How many times have you heard someone say, or perhaps said yourself, "I'm terrible with directions, I'm not a morning person," or "I'm always late"? When you repeat these statements to yourself over and over again, they become mental grooves. Your brain accepts them as absolute facts, and you begin to act in ways that align with these negative, self-fulfilling prophecies. If you believe you have a sweet tooth, you won't even try to resist dessert. If you believe you are bad at math, you will give up on a difficult problem before you even start. To break free from bad habits, you must be willing to unlearn your old identity. You must actively cast votes for a new version of yourself. The transformation does not happen overnight, but through the slow, steady accumulation of tiny habits, you can physically rewrite the story of who you are. Point 3. Why must we make our habits obvious? How much of your day is driven by conscious choice rather than automatic subconscious programming? The truth is that our brains are incredibly efficient prediction machines, constantly scanning our surroundings for cues that trigger our deeply ingrained routines. Before we can hope to build better habits, we must first understand the fundamental loop that governs all human behavior. Every habit follows a specific four-step pattern: cue, craving, response, and reward. The cue triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. It is a bit of information that predicts a reward. Because our prehistoric ancestors were constantly paying attention to cues that signaled the location of primary rewards like food and water, our modern brains spend entirely too much time scanning the environment for cues that signal secondary rewards like money, fame, approval, and personal satisfaction. Once a cue is noticed, it naturally leads to a craving. Cravings are the motivational force behind every habit. What you crave is not the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. You do not crave smoking a cigarette, you crave the feeling of relief it provides. You do not crave turning on the television, you crave being entertained. The response is the actual habit you perform, which can take the form of a thought or an action. Finally, the response delivers a reward, which satisfies the craving and teaches your brain to remember the cue for the future. To build a good habit, we must master the first law of behavior change: make it obvious. The biggest challenge in changing our habits is that we are completely blind to them. They have become so automatic that we perform them without a second thought. Have you ever absent-mindedly eaten an entire bag of chips while watching a movie, only realizing what you had done when your fingers scraped the bottom of the empty bag? To break this automatic programming, we need to bring our habits back into conscious awareness. The Japanese railway system uses a brilliant safety protocol called pointing and calling to achieve exceptional awareness. As a train approaches a signal, the operator literally points at the signal and calls out its status aloud. Signal is green. As the train pulls into a station, the operator points at the speedometer and calls out the exact speed. Every detail is identified, pointed at, and spoken aloud. This system seems silly to outsiders, but it reduces errors by up to 85% and cuts accidents by 30%. Why? Because it moves an automatic subconscious action into the realm of conscious thought. You can apply a similar method to your own life using a tool called the Habit Scorecard. Simply make a list of your daily routines from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. Wake up, turn off alarm, check phone, go to the bathroom, weigh yourself, take a shower, brush your teeth, pour coffee. Once you have a full list, categorize each habit as positive, negative, or neutral based on your long-term goals. The goal is not to judge yourself or feel guilty about your bad habits. The goal is simply to observe what is actually happening. Awareness is the prerequisite for change. Once you are aware of your current habits, you can use highly specific strategies to make your desired new habits incredibly obvious. One of the most effective techniques is an implementation intention. Many people try to change their habits by relying on vague motivation. They tell themselves, I'm going to eat healthier, or I'm going to write more. These statements leave precisely too much room for interpretation. When the time comes to act, you have to make a decision, which requires willpower. An implementation intention removes the guesswork by stating exactly when and where you will perform a new behavior. The formula is beautifully simple: I will behavior at time and location. Hundreds of studies have shown that people who make a specific plan for when and where they will perform a new habit are significantly more likely to follow through. Instead of saying, I will exercise more, You say, I will exercise for 30 minutes at 6 a.m. at the local gym. Instead of saying, I will read more, you say, I will read one chapter of a book at 9 p.m. in my bedroom. By creating a clear, obvious cue for your behavior, you eliminate the need for motivation. When the clock strikes 6, you don't have to think about it, you just execute the plan. Another powerful way to make habits obvious is through habit stacking. This involves tying your new habit to an existing habit that you already perform reliably every single day. The formula for habit stacking is after current habit, I will new habit. For example, after I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. Or after I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. By linking your new behavior to a deeply ingrained routine, you use the momentum of your old habit to power the new one. However, the most profound way to make good habits obvious is through environment design. We like to believe that we are in complete control of our choices, but the truth is that our environment dramatically shapes our behavior. Back in the late 1990s, a physician named Anne Thorndike conducted a fascinating experiment at Massachusetts General Hospital. She wanted to improve the eating habits of the hospital staff and visitors without changing their willpower or motivation. She simply rearranged the hospital cafeteria. Originally, the refrigerators next to the cash registers contained only soda. She added bottled water to these refrigerators and placed baskets of bottled water throughout the room. Over the next 6 months, soda sales dropped by 11%, while bottled water sales skyrocketed by 25%. Nobody said a word to the customers. The altered environment simply made the healthier choice more obvious. Your environment is an invisible hand that guides your behavior. If you want to practice guitar more often, do not leave it hidden in a case in the back of your closet. Put it on a stand right in the middle of your living room. If you want to remember to take your vitamins, place the bottle directly next to your bathroom sink. Make the cues for your good habits visually prominent. Conversely, to break a bad habit, you must invert the first law, make it invisible. If you spend too much time watching television, move the TV out of your bedroom. If you constantly check your phone while working, leave it in another room. Willpower is a short-term strategy, not a long-term solution. The people with the highest self-control are typically the ones who need to use it the least. They simply design their environments so they do not have to constantly fight temptation. By making the cues for good habits obvious and the cues for bad habits invisible, you make success the path of least resistance. Point 4. How can we make good habits irresistible? What is the secret ingredient that makes scrolling through social media, eating junk food, or playing video games so endlessly captivating? Why do we effortlessly spend hours engaged in these activities, yet struggle to find the motivation to read a book or go for a run? By understanding the biological and social forces that drive our deepest desires, we can engineer our positive habits to be just as appealing. This brings us to the second law of behavior change: make it attractive. To understand why some habits are so magnetically appealing, we have to look inside the brain at a neurotransmitter called dopamine. For a long time, scientists believed dopamine was solely responsible for the sensation of pleasure. However, modern research has revealed a fascinating twist. Dopamine is not just about experiencing pleasure, it is fundamentally about anticipating it. Consider a famous experiment conducted on rats. Scientists implanted electrodes in the brains of rats to block the release of dopamine. The results were startling. The rats lost all will to live. They wouldn't eat, they wouldn't mate, they wouldn't even crave water. Within a few days, they died of thirst. However, when the scientists placed sugar directly into the mouths of these dopamine-deprived rats, the rats still showed signs of pleasure. They liked the sugar, but they had absolutely no desire to seek it out. Without dopamine, desire dies. In our own lives, it is the anticipation of a reward, not the fulfillment of it, that actually gets us to take action. When you see a notification on your phone, you get a spike of dopamine before you even open the app. The anticipation of seeing a message from a friend or a new like on a photo is what compels you to pick up the device. This is why planning a vacation can sometimes feel just as exciting as actually going on the vacation. Our brains are wired to reward us for seeking out resources, which means we need to find ways to make our good habits trigger that same sense of eager anticipation. One highly effective strategy to achieve this is called temptation bundling. Temptation bundling works by linking an action you want to do with an action you need to do. An engineering student named Ronan Byrne used this exact strategy to solve his struggle with exercising. Ronan knew he needed to work out more, but he really just wanted to watch Netflix. So he hacked an exercise bike and connected it to his laptop. He wrote a computer program that would only allow Netflix to play if he was pedaling at a certain speed. If he slowed down, the show would pause until he sped back up. He successfully bundled a high dopamine activity, watching television, with a healthy habit, exercising, making the healthy habit incredibly attractive. You can apply temptation bundling to your own life in countless ways. If you love listening to a specific true crime podcast, make a rule that you are only allowed to listen to it while cleaning the house or running on the treadmill. If you want to get a pedicure, tie it to responding to your overdue work emails. By pairing a want with a need, you borrow the attractiveness of the rewarding activity and transfer it to the difficult habit. Beyond biology, our desires are profoundly shaped by the social environment we inhabit. Humans are deeply social animals. For thousands of years, our survival depended on staying with the tribe. Being separated from the tribe meant certain death. Therefore, our brains evolved to constantly seek alignment with the people around us. We naturally want to fit in, to earn the respect of our peers, and to avoid social isolation. Because of this deeply ingrained need to belong, we naturally imitate the habits of three specific groups: the close, the many, and the powerful. First, we imitate the close. We pick up habits from our friends, our family members, and our roommates. If your friends all order dessert at dinner, you are highly likely to order dessert as well. If your spouse is a meticulous cleaner, you will likely become tidier yourself. Therefore, one of the most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. If you want to read more, join a book club. If you want to run a marathon, join a running group. When you surround yourself with people who already possess the habits you want to build, those habits become highly attractive because they help you fit in with the tribe. Second, we imitate the many. Whenever we are unsure of how to act, we look to the group to guide our behavior. We check online reviews before buying a product, and we assume a crowded restaurant must be good. The pressure to conform to the masses can be incredibly powerful, which is why it is so difficult to stick to a diet when everyone else at the office is eating donuts. To leverage this, you must consciously choose environments where the majority of people are aligned with your goals. Third, we imitate the powerful. We are naturally drawn to behaviors that earn us respect, approval, and status. We buy expensive clothes or drive nice cars because we want to signal our success to others. You can use this to your advantage by reframing your habits to highlight how they will increase your status or make you more capable in the eyes of others. Finally, to break a bad habit, we must invert the second law, make it unattractive. Our bad habits usually provide some sort of immediate relief, which makes them appealing. To overcome this, we must actively reframe our mindset to highlight the negative aspects of our bad habits and the positive aspects of avoiding them. Pay close attention to the language you use. We often say we have to do things. I have to wake up early for work. I have to cook dinner. I have to go to the gym. By simply changing one word, you can completely shift your perspective. I get to wake up early for work. I get to cook dinner. I get to go to the gym. This subtle shift changes your mindset from one of burden to one of opportunity. When you highlight the benefits of your good habits and the drawbacks of your bad ones, you fundamentally alter how attractive they appear to your brain. Point 5. What makes us finally take consistent action? Have you ever spent hours meticulously researching the best workout program, buying the perfect running shoes, and creating the ultimate upbeat playlist, only to never actually step foot out the door to go for a run? We frequently fall into the trap of confusing movement with true action. This is the core challenge addressed by the third law of behavior change: make it easy. There is a profound difference between being in motion and taking action. Motion is when you are planning, strategizing, and learning. Those are all good things, but they do not produce an actual result. Action, on the other hand, is the type of behavior that directly delivers an outcome. Researching different diet plans is motion. Eating a healthy meal is action. Emailing a personal trainer to ask about their rates is motion. Doing 10 push-ups right now is action. Why do we spend so much time in motion? It is usually a clever psychological trick we play on ourselves to delay failure. We want to feel like we are making progress without actually taking the risk of failing. However, to master a habit, the key is to start with repetition, not perfection. You do not need to map out every single detail perfectly. You simply need to get your reps in. This brings us to a fundamental principle of human nature: the law of least effort. Humans are biologically wired to conserve energy. When presented with two similar options, people will naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work. It is not that you are inherently lazy, it is simply that your brain is highly efficient. Think about the expansion of agriculture across the globe. Agriculture spread much faster across Europe and Asia than it did in the Americas. Why? Because Europe and Asia are oriented horizontally, meaning the climate stays relatively consistent as you move east to west. The Americas are oriented vertically, meaning early farmers would have to adapt to drastically different climates as they moved north to south. The path of least resistance always wins out in the end. If you want to build a good habit, you must reduce the friction associated with it. The greater the friction, the less likely the habit will occur. This is where environment design returns as a crucial tool. You can practice addition by subtraction to remove the obstacles that stand in your way. If you want to go to the gym before work, lay out your workout clothes, your shoes, and your keys the night before. If you want to eat healthier, chop up vegetables on Sunday so they are readily available in the fridge during the week. By reducing the number of steps between you and your good habit, you dramatically increase the odds that you will actually do it. One of the most powerful techniques for making a habit easy is the 2-minute rule. This rule states that when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. The idea is to scale down your desired behavior until it is almost ridiculously easy. Read before bed each night becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat. Study for class becomes open my notes. Fold the laundry becomes fold 1 pair of socks. You might be thinking, what is the point of reading just 1 page or folding a single pair of socks? The point is not to do one thing. The point is to master the art of showing up. A habit must be established before it can be improved. You cannot optimize a habit that does not exist. Too often, we try to start with a massive, life-changing routine that completely drains our willpower. By shrinking the habit down to a 2-minute version, you are building the identity of someone who consistently takes action. You are casting a vote for the type of person you want to become. Once you have mastered the 2-minute habit, you can begin a process called habit shaping. You start by mastering the first 2 minutes, and then you gradually move to the next phase. First, you put on your running shoes. Once that is an automatic habit, you step out the door and walk for 10 minutes. Once that is automatic, you jog for 15 minutes. You slowly increase the difficulty, but only after the previous step has become deeply ingrained in your daily routine. Conversely, to break a bad habit, you must invert the third law: make it difficult. You need to increase the friction between you and the negative behavior. If you want to watch less television, unplug the TV and take the batteries out of the remote after every use. If you want to stop endlessly scrolling on your phone in bed, leave your phone charging in the kitchen overnight. You can also use what is known as a commitment device, which is a choice you make in the present that locks in better behavior in the future. The legendary author Victor Hugo used a brilliant commitment device when he was struggling to write The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He had a strict deadline from his publisher, but he kept procrastinating by entertaining guests and going out to parties. To force himself to work, he gathered all of his clothes and locked them away in a large chest. He was left with nothing but a large shawl to wear. Because he had no appropriate clothing to go outside, he was forced to stay in his study and write. By making his bad habit of going out physically impossible, he made his good habit of writing inevitable. By aggressively reducing the friction for your good habits and violently increasing the friction for your bad ones, you harness the law of least effort to work for you rather than against you. Point 6. Why do we keep repeating the same behaviors? Why do we willingly engage in bad habits when we know perfectly well that they will harm us in the long run? Why do we smoke, overeat, or procrastinate when we are fully aware of the negative consequences? The human brain is heavily biased toward immediate gratification, creating a significant challenge for anyone trying to build routines that only pay off years down the line. To solve this puzzle, we must embrace the fourth law of behavior change: make it satisfying. The first three laws, make it obvious, make it attractive, and make it easy, are designed to increase the odds that a behavior will happen this time. The fourth law, make it satisfying, is designed to increase the odds that a behavior will be repeated next time. This brings us to the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in what scientists call an immediate return environment. Our ancestors spent their days hunting, gathering, and seeking shelter. Every action they took delivered an immediate result. If they found a berry, they ate it and felt immediate satiety. If they ran from a predator, they survived. Because our survival depended on rapid responses to immediate threats and rewards, our brains evolved to heavily prioritize the present moment over the future. However, we now live in a delayed return environment. You go to work today, but you do not get your paycheck until the end of the month. You go to the gym today, but you do not get fit until next year. You save money today, but you do not get to enjoy a comfortable retirement for decades. Our modern society requires us to value delayed gratification, but our ancient brains are still screaming for immediate rewards. This mismatch is the root cause of almost all our struggles with bad habits. A bad habit usually delivers immediate pleasure, but the ultimate cost is delayed. Smoking a cigarette feels good right now, but it causes cancer 20 years later. Conversely, a good habit usually requires immediate sacrifice, but the ultimate reward is delayed. Going for a run is exhausting right now, but it leads to vibrant health in the future. To overcome this biological bias, we must figure out how to add a little bit of immediate pleasure to the habits that pay off in the long run. We need to feel a sense of success, even if it is a small one, right after we perform our good habit. One of the most effective ways to do this is by using a habit tracker. A habit tracker is a simple visual method to measure whether you did a habit. The most basic format is getting a calendar and crossing off each day you stick with your routine. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld famously used this method to write jokes. He told a young comedian that the secret to being a better comic was writing better jokes, and the secret to writing better jokes was writing every day. He suggested getting a large wall calendar and a red marker. Every day he wrote, he would put a big red X over that day. After a few days, you'll have a chain, Seinfeld said. Just keep at it, and the chain will grow longer every day. You'll like seeing that chain, especially when you get a few weeks under your belt. Your only job next is to not break the chain. Habit tracking is powerful because it leverages multiple laws of behavior change simultaneously. It makes a habit obvious by providing a visual cue on your wall or desk. It makes a habit attractive because seeing the chain grow provides a hit of dopamine. Most importantly, it makes a habit incredibly satisfying. The physical act of crossing off a day on a calendar or moving a paperclip from one jar to another provides an immediate sense of accomplishment. It is a tangible reward for the hard work you just put in. However, no matter how consistent you are, life will inevitably get in the way. You will get sick, you will have to travel, or a family emergency will arise. When you miss a day of your habit, it is crucial to follow a simple but unbreakable rule: never miss twice. Missing one workout does not make you out of shape. Eating one unhealthy meal does not ruin your diet. The first mistake is never the one that ruins you, it is the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows. Anyone can have a bad day, but successful people rebound immediately. If you miss one day, you simply view it as a minor bump in the road and dedicate yourself to getting back on track the very next day. You do not need to be perfect, you just need to avoid the compounding effect of consecutive failures. To break a bad habit, we must invert the fourth law: make it unsatisfying. If a behavior is painful or highly undesirable in the present moment, we are drastically less likely to repeat it. You can make bad habits instantly unsatisfying by creating a habit contract. A habit contract is a verbal or written agreement in which you commit to a specific habit and establish a clear punishment for failing to follow through. You then find an accountability partner to enforce the contract. For example, entrepreneur Brian Harris created a strict weight loss contract with his wife and his personal trainer. He committed to specific dietary rules and workout schedules. If he failed to track his food, he had to pay his trainer $50. If he failed to do his weekly weigh-in, he had to dress up in nice clothes every day for a week. Knowing that someone is watching you and knowing that there is an immediate, painful consequence for failure can be an incredibly powerful motivator. When the cost of a bad habit becomes public and painful, the appeal of the bad habit vanishes entirely. By intentionally making your good habits highly satisfying and your bad habits deeply unsatisfying, you guarantee that your actions align with your long-term goals. Point 7. The conclusion. The compounding of character, mastering the art of atomic living. The journey through the intricate architecture of human behavior concludes not with a final destination, but with a profound commitment to a system of continuous improvement. As we have explored through the foundational principles of James Clear's Atomic Habits, the quality of our lives is a direct reflection of the quality of our recurring rituals. We began by dismantling the myth of the overnight success and replacing it with the reality of the plateau of latent potential, the quiet, invisible accumulation of results that eventually shatters through the surface of expectation. We analyzed the biological and psychological loops of cue, craving, response, and reward. And we mastered the 4 laws of behavior change: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. This final synthesis serves as a master blueprint for the long-term maintenance of excellence. To live the life of an atomic habit practitioner is to realize that the most powerful force in the universe is not a single heroic act, but the compounding interest of being 1% better every single day. At the core of this mastery lies a fundamental shift in perspective, from goal-oriented thinking to system-oriented living. Most people spend their lives chasing outcomes: a specific weight, a certain bank balance, or a professional title. However, as our exploration has shown, goals are at best temporary markers of progress, and at worst, psychological traps that create a yo-yo effect of effort and complacency. The master of habits focuses instead on the identity they wish to embody. True behavior change is identity change. When you stop saying, "I am trying to run a marathon," and start saying, "I am a runner," the friction of the habit evaporates. You are no longer fighting against yourself to achieve an external metric. You are simply acting in alignment with the person you believe yourself to be. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Over time, these votes accumulate into a landslide of evidence that transforms your self-image. The maintenance of these systems requires a ruthless commitment to the 4 laws as a lifestyle, not just a project. We have learned to design our environments so that the cues for our good habits are glaringly obvious and the cues for our bad habits are invisible. This environmental design is the ultimate act of self love. It is your past self making life easier for your future self. By leveraging the power of habit stacking and implementation intentions, you remove the need for willpower. Willpower is a finite resource that fails us when we are tired, stressed, or distracted. Systems, however, are resilient. When you make a habit easy by reducing the friction to the point where it takes less than 2 minutes to start, you ensure that even on your worst days, you still show up. Success is not about doing 1000% more than everyone else. It is about being the person who never misses twice. Furthermore, we must embrace the Goldilocks rule of human motivation. To maintain interest and engagement over the long haul, we must constantly operate at the edge of our abilities. Not so easy that we become bored, but not so difficult that we become discouraged. This is where the boredom of mastery comes into play. The greatest threat to success is not failure, but boredom. Most people quit their habits not because they aren't seeing results, but because they stop being entertained by the process. The master strategist learns to fall in love with the boredom, to find beauty in the repetition, and to trust that the compounding interest of their efforts is working beneath the surface, even when the results are not yet visible. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. As we conclude this blueprint, we must address the social and psychological dimensions of habit formation. We are social animals, and we tend to adopt the habits of the groups we belong to. To live a life of excellence, you must curate a tribe where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. When you are surrounded by people who value growth, health, and discipline, the attractive nature of good habits becomes self-sustaining. Conversely, the final law, making it satisfying, reminds us that we are more likely to repeat a behavior when the immediate experience is pleasurable. By utilizing habit trackers and rewarding yourself for the process rather than the outcome, you bridge the gap between the effort of today and the reward of tomorrow. In these final words, let the pursuit of perfection be replaced by the pursuit of persistence. You now possess the scientific understanding of how your brain works and the practical tools to reshape your reality. You are no longer a victim of your genetics or your environment. You are the architect of your own character. The atomic nature of these habits reminds us that even the smallest change, when multiplied by time, creates a radical transformation. Step forward with the confidence of someone who knows that their destiny is not written in the stars, but in the small choices they make before breakfast. The book is closed, but the compounding has just begun. Stay focused on the system, trust the process, and remember, small habits don't add up, they compound.